rank. You too. Tell you we don't win yet. Well done, well done. Company shoulder, belay that. Order, firelocks. Rest. Ease. Let's fall out in some fashion. We don't have a script. Behind the speaker's podium here, so that all the folks can get nice pictures of you. Fall out and reassemble.
Detail, left face. Shoulder locks. Left face. Follow me. Left face, follow Mark.
Turn it all the way around. Turn it all the way around. Music here in the center works okay.
Jim, where would you like to put your neck? You guys like to go around? So, right face. No, right face. 3 steps forward, mark.
Yourself comfortable.
1, 2, 3. Hold. Left face. Rest. Order arm. And rest.
Rest. Ease. Well, good day, all. Is this working? Oh, you think that'll do it? Well, that's probably, thank you. We are most pleased to be here today, and mildly stunned that so many of you have come out to join with us. This is pretty terrific stuff. It's also appropriate that it's a stormy day. In 1777, when members of various Connecticut militia regiments had mustered in New Haven, and the call went out for a reprisal raid against the British stronghold at Sag Harbor. The force was assembled in New Haven. And it got about this far. And due to a storm, pulled into Guilford Harbor. I suspect none of those runabouts were out there then. And they spent a day or two here waiting for that storm to blow over. We first attempted the unveiling on the anniversary day back in May. And it was a day just like today, only worse. So we're glad you're here. We're glad to be here. We've already posted the colors. I would like to thank members of the 6th Connecticut who put forth the effort to make this event a possibility, along with our friend of the 6th Connecticut, Tracy Tomaselli. Many thanks, Tracy. Our committee worked long and hard through some weather adversity, but we're here. The plaque is here, and we'll carry on the memory of what transpired here 241 years ago. First, we would have our musicians play Chester. This is the Hearts of Oak Independent Militia Company. Where are you folks? Are they here? Can you do Chester now? Yep. Carry on, lads. By the way, Chester was unofficially the national anthem at the time.
Carry on.
Now, before going any further, some of you are probably wondering, what is that? I'm talking about this. This is the Grand Union flag, also called the Continental flag. And it is a replica of the flag that it has been written about that George Washington had constructed and flew in the face of the enemy at Cambridge when the American forces had the British surrounded in Boston. And that was basically our first national colors, and was to remain that way until June 14th of 77, when Congress in its wisdom decreed a particular flag and arrangement. But this was the first one. The fact that it carried the ensign from the British Isles, apparently Washington thought that while we were separate, we were equal. I think we've heard that before. This was before the break, the real break, wanting to indicate that perhaps everything could be salvaged. But of course, we know that's not the case. I have on the program here, invocation, Beth Frisbee, Chaplain Jordan Freeman, DAR. Thank you, milady.
Good morning. Before we come together in prayer, we should reflect on how the American colonists faced the mighty British war machine that was at its peak of power and dominance, and how these colonists found their answers in prayer. The first meeting of the First Continental Congress took place on September 5th, 1774 in Philadelphia. Delegates traveled from as far north as New England and from as far south as South Carolina to discuss how to deal with the growing British oppression. It was proposed that they begin their deliberations with prayer. Two delegates, however, opposed the motion on the grounds that they were such a diverse religious group, including Anglicans, Puritans, Presbyterians, and Quakers, that it would be impossible for them to pray together. Sam Adams, a Puritan from Boston, who had been impacted by the Great Awakening, arose and said that he was not a bigoted man, and that he could join in prayer with any person of piety and virtue who loved his country. Reverend Jacob Dusk of Philadelphia read the entire 35th Psalm, which powerfully impacted everyone present. It is a prayer of David for deliverance and begins with the words, "Plead my cause, O Lord, with those who strive against me. Fight against those who fight against me. The psalm ends with praise for God's deliverance. As the psalm was read, a unique sense of God's presence filled the room, and tears flowed from the eyes. After reading the psalm, Dusk began praying for the delegates, for America, and especially for the city of Boston and its inhabitants who were under siege. As he began praying, the Anglicans, such as George Washington and Richard Henry Lee, knelt in prayer according to their custom. The Puritans, according to their custom, sat with bowed heads and prayed. Others prayed according to their own unique customs. But although their outward manners differed, there was a singleness of heart and purpose as they all united in prayer for God's assistance and intervention for America. Let us now come together in prayer.
Uncovered.
Dear Lord, we gather here today in singleness of our hearts and purpose, as we honor and give thanks to the brave men and women who struggled for independence during the American Revolution. May we keep their unity in prayer alive today by praying for our great country and the safety of our brave men and women who continue to serve. We ask this in your loving name. Amen.
Does everybody have a program? I'm going to do a quick accounting, a reaccounting of the raid that we are remarking about today. While in New Haven, about the middle of May, General Parsons, learning that the enemy was collecting forage on the east end of Long Island for the supply of their army in New York, ordered a detachment under Colonel Meigs to proceed to Sag Harbor and destroy it. The intelligence of that area was brought to military command in New Haven at the time by a fellow named Ethan Jennings. He was from Sag Harbor, had been rousted out of his home, and had fled to Connecticut to escape the British tyranny. It was he who first came up with the idea of a reprisal raid, saying that he could guide that raid because he knew the town. As the word of that raid sort of moved up the chain of command, it eventually got, of course, to General Parsons and then to General Washington. Everybody agreed. It was worth trying, particularly after the bloody nose that we received at Danbury. The following report made by General Parsons to General Washington gives the details of the expedition. Dated New Haven, May 25th, 1777. Dear General, having received information that the enemy were collecting forage horses on the east end of Long Island, I ordered a detachment from the several regiments then at this place, consisting of 1 major, 4 captains, Troop, Pond, Mansfield, and Savage, and 9 subalterns. The 220 men, non-commissioned officers and privates under the command of Colonel Return Jonathan Meigs, to attack their different posts on that part of the island and destroy forage, and which they had collected. Colonel Meigs embarked his men here and 13 whaleboats on the 21st instant and proceeded to Guilford. where here we are. But the wind proving high and the sea rough could not pass the Sound until Friday, the 23rd. He left Guilford at 1 o'clock in the afternoon of the 23rd with 170 of his detachment and under convoy of 2 armed sloops and in company with another unarmed to bring off the prisoners. Seems like they had high hopes. They were going to bring off prisoners. They crossed the Sound to the north branch of the island near Southold, where he arrived about 6 o'clock in the evening. The enemy's troops on this branch of the island had marched for New York just 2 days before, but about 60 of the enemy remaining at a place called Sag Harbor, about 15 miles distant on the south branch of the island. He ordered 11 whaleboats with as many men as could be safely transported across the bay, over the land to the bay, where they re-embarked to the number of 130, and about 12 o'clock arrived safe across the bay, within 4 miles of the harbor, where, having secured the boats in the woods under care of a guard, Colonel Meigs formed his little remaining detachment in proper order for attacking the different posts and quarters of the enemy and securing the vessels and forage at the same time. They marched in the greatest order and silence, and at 2 o'clock arrived at the harbor. With fixed bayonets, tacked the guards and posts assigned them, whilst Captain Troop, with the detachment under his command, secured the vessels and forage lying at the wharf. The alarm soon became general when an armed schooner of 12 guns and 70 men within 150 yards of the wharf began to fire upon our troops, which continued without cessation for 3/4 of an hour, with grape and round shot. But the troops, with the greatest intrepidity, returned the fire upon the schooner and set fire to the vessels and forage, and killed and captured all the soldiers and sailors, except about 6, who made their escape under cover of night. 12 brigs and sloops, 1 an armed vessel with 12 guns, about 120 tons of pressed hay, oats, corn, and other forage, 10 hogsheads of rum, and a large quantity of other merchandise were entirely consumed. It gives me the greatest satisfaction to hear the officers and soldiers, without exception, behaved with the greatest bravery, order, and intrepidity. Colonel Meigs, having finished the business on which he was sent, returned safe with all his men by 2 o'clock p.m. yesterday, with 90 prisoners, having in 25 hours, by land and water, transported his men full 90 miles, and succeeded in his attempts beyond my most sanguine expectations, without losing a single man, either killed or wounded. It gives me singular pleasure to hear no disposition appeared in any one soldier to plunder the inhabitants or violate private property in the smallest degree, and that even the clothing and other articles belonging to the prisoners the soldiers, with a generosity not learned from British troops, have with great cheerfulness restored to them where they have fallen into their hands. Major Humphreys, who awaits on your excellency with the account, was in action with Colonel Meigs and will be able to give any further necessary information. I am Samuel H. Parsons. Washington replies from his headquarters at Middlebrook on the 29th of May. Dear Sir, I was just now favored with your letter of the 25th by Major Humphreys. The intelligence communicated by it is truly interesting and agreeable, and now I shall take occasion not only to give you my hearty approbation of your conduct in planning the expedition to Long Island, but to return my sincere thanks to Lieutenant Colonel Meigs and to all officers and men engaged in it. This enterprise, so fortunate in the execution, will greatly distress the enemy in the important and essential article of forage, and reflects much honor on those who performed it. I shall be happy to reward merit when in my power, and therefore wish you to inquire for a vacant ensigncy in some of the regiments for Sergeant Jennings. You remember I spoke about Jennings in the beginning. To which you will promote him, advising me of the same and the time. As I could only repeat what I have said in my former letters to you and to Governor Trumbull on the subject of his and the Assembly's request for part of the troops to remain in Connecticut, it is unnecessary for me to say more respecting it than that I cannot possibly comply with it at this time. The passes and fortifications in the Highlands are of the least last importance, and every means in our power must be employed to secure them. The enemy's movements, which most notably will be understood in a little time, should be such as to show that Hudson's River is not their object, and the state of the troops will admit, I shall with great pleasure post a part of them about White Plains and Stamford, and give every protection I can to Connecticut, consistent with the general interest. But till these events take place, neither prudence nor policy will justify me in sparing men. You will, agreeably to my request, repair to Peekskill after making the necessary orders about the troops. I am, with great esteem, George Washington.
Huzzah!
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 Correct. Well, for some of us. That, in a brief nutshell, is 4 days in the life of that raid, starting in New Haven and culminating in New Haven. Next on our program today calls for a proclamation from Matt Huey, First Selectman. How are you?
Well, Captain, nice to see you. On behalf of the Board of Selectmen, as well as the entire community, the town of Guilford, I want to thank the captain, his troops, and all those who had an opportunity to participate in planning this event. A particular shout out once again to Tracy Tomaselli, who gives so much of her time to honor the past in this community. Thank you, Tracy. The Board of Selectmen entrusted in me to read the following language, and please excuse the number of whereases, but proclamations are traditionally full of them. Exactly. Whereas we gather today to commemorate Meigs' raid, which launched from Guilford on May 23rd, 1777, during the American Revolutionary War. And whereas Lieutenant Colonel Meigs and his 170 men left Guilford to attack Sag Harbor on Long Island in retaliation for the burning of Danbury, Connecticut. And whereas utilizing 13 whaleboats and 3 sloops, only 2 of which were armed, Lieutenant Colonel Meigs and his men raided Sag Harbor on Long Island. And whereas Lieutenant Colonel Meigs and his men returned to Connecticut within 25 hours, having killed 6 loyalists, taking 90 prisoners, and suffering no casualties themselves. And whereas this battle marked the first American victory in the state of New York after New York City and Long Island had fallen in the British campaign for the city in 1776, now therefore be it resolved that we, the Board of Selectmen of the town of Guilford, do hereby proclaim today to be Meigs' Raid Day in honor of the bravery and courage of Lieutenant Colonel Meigs and his men. In witness whereof we hereunto set our hands and cause the seal of the town of Guilford to be affixed this 18th day of August 2018.
Anybody want to take a picture? Come on, Ted, picture time. I just think I got to be captain. Yeah. Terrific. Wonderful. Thanks. Captain, Tracy. Yeah. You want to do that now? Yeah. What proclamation are you doing? Tracy, come up.
Yeah, I know.
Right ahead.
As your program notes, Sean Scanlon was to have provided some remarks, and I do not contend to be the orator that young Sean Scanlon is, but he was going to talk about having grown up in his community and the sense of history that this community imbibed in him, and the value of honoring our past so that we can forge a better future. This is one of those examples of the commitment that our community made to ensuring the freedom that we hold so dear today. And that's a slight paraphrase of what Sean would have said. Unfortunately, Sean had an unexpected family obligation he had to take care of today, but he also was going to read a proclamation that from the office of Daniel Malloy, our governor, and this is a statement, and if you'll indulge me, more whereases. Whereas Lieutenant Colonel Returned Jonathan Meigs commanded 170 American patriots in the raid of Sag Harbor on May 24th, 1777, and whereas the patriots of Connecticut had sailed across the Long Island Sound with the intent to ambush stationed British soldiers, and whereas a reported 12 British boats were destroyed along with 53 prisoners captured, all without losing a single patriot, and whereas Lieutenant Colonel Meigs' raid on Sag Harbor is still regarded as one of the region's most decisive skirmishes in the Revolutionary War, and whereas it is important to educate others about the history of our state, as it allows for the memory of heroes such as Lieutenant Colonel Meigs to live on, and whereas in addition to commemorating Meigs' raid each year on May 24th, may this proclamation serve as an additional means of recognizing the many sacrifices made in the cause of liberty. Now, therefore, I, Daniel P. Malloy, Governor of the State of Connecticut, do hereby officially recognize the achievements of Returned Jonathan Meigs in the state of Connecticut.
during the school year, one of the teachers inspired the students to write an essay about this event. We have now the winning essay, read by our secretary, Private Lord, otherwise known as Anthony Laurenti.
Thank you, good captain, and thank you one and all for coming once again. Read in its entirety and verbatim on behalf of Matthew Kotzbauer, E.C. Adams Middle School. On May 23rd, 1777, Colonel Return Jonathan Meigs embarked from New Haven with a squad of 234 men, intending to win back Long Island, New York, from the British in the midst of the Revolutionary War. Upon his return to American territory, he would be seen as not only a hero among the Americans, but as a crucial progressor for America, whose contributions remained almost unparalleled throughout the rest of the war. Meigs' 234 men used 13 whaleboats for transportation as they started off by sailing from New Haven to Guilford. They intended on attacking Sag Harbor, a harbor controlled by the British, which contained nearly all of the British soldiers residing on Long Island. Meigs and his men waited in Guilford from the 22nd to the 23rd, and then proceeded to depart for Long Island at 1 p.m., leaving Guilford with his 170 remaining men. Meigs and his troops proceeded to row to Long Island in their whaleboats, while also under the protection of 2 armed sloops, which are ships with a single mast and a fore and aft rig. They arrived at Long Island at roughly 6 p.m. and proceeded to march their 13 whaleboats across the beaches until they were within a few miles of Sag Harbor. Placing their rowboats in the woods for protection, Meigs and his troops marched toward Sag Harbor with extreme stealth and secrecy. They weren't discovered until 2 in the morning. When they were already within 20 or so meters of the fort, that would be a period, by the way, once at the fort, they immediately attacked its outposts with bayonets. After they were satisfied with the damage they had done, they proceeded to the wharf, the area near the shore where boats can be uploaded and sent out, which was left completely unguarded. They kept attacking until an alarm was given. An armed ship with 12 guns and 70 men then came out and fired on them from 150 yards away for about 3/4 of an hour. While they were being shot at, however, Meigs and his men kept damaging Sag Harbor and finding things to bring back with them to American-controlled territory. Meigs and his men destroyed 12 British ships, with one of them being an armed ship with 12 guns. Additionally, they destroyed 120 tons of hay, 10 hogsheads of rum, some corn and oats, and a large quantity of British merchandise. 6 of the British were killed, and 90 were taken prisoner, without Meigs losing a single man. All of the British prisoners were allowed to keep their belongings. Upon returning to American territory, Meigs was seen as a hero. Thanks to Meigs and his men, America reclaimed Long Island, and with it essential leverage during the heat of the Revolution. He accomplished one of the most influential and miraculous feats of the war, and had made a huge contribution to the American cause. Congress voted him a sword and thanked him. Under all perspectives and viewpoints, this battle served as a victory for the Americans. The battle is of greater significance, however, when seen as a representation of the American cause, spirit, and honor. By allowing the British prisoners to keep their belongings, Meigs clearly prioritized the advancement of the American cause over unnecessary damage to the British. In his act of letting his enemy keep items that could potentially benefit them in the future, he also showcased a great amount of honor and sportsmanship, feeling no need to deprive the losing side of their lives, rights, or property. Meigs also showed genuine care for the lives of his men while fighting, so that no one was left behind despite the amount of progress they were able to make. While it certainly would be easier to take a reckless approach to damaging Sag Harbor, Meigs was above that. He had too much respect and care for his troops to waste a single soldier's life or well-being. The greatest feat of Meigs and his men mentally, however, would most likely be their display of perseverance and effort. Despite having the option to hesitate to move and risk getting spotted by sentry, the men snuck to the fort until it was 2 in the morning so that they could get off the best attack. Despite being fully able to hide and run away while being shot at from 150 yards for 3/4 of an hour, the men kept attacking the fort so they could do as much damage as possible. Though the aforementioned examples of courage and effort, the aforementioned examples of courage and effort, the perseverance that Meigs and his men have shown is not only evident and undeniable, but clearly displayed and reflected in every action of the individuals involved in the attack. And in a sense, Colonel Meigs' raid on Sag Harbor serves as a solid representation of the characteristics and values which up to this day serve as defining characteristics of America's government and people. By Matthew Kotzbauer, E.C. Adams Middle School. Thank you.
As a quick aside, during the 225th anniversary of this attack in 2002, the 6th Connecticut went to Sag Harbor. We had been there a number of times before, and we recreated the battle. We walked the attack lines. I couldn't get a whaleboat to bring us across the Sound. I tried. That just didn't quite work. But one of the things that I remember most about that entire weekend was May. It snowed, sleet, rain. However, we took the time. We found out that 6 British soldiers were buried at the burying ground, the high ground, the highest ground in the village of Sag Harbor. And as best as we could tell, they had never been given honors by anyone. We performed a ceremony on the top of that hill that day, and were you there, Jim? And I must say, they were the enemy, but in that ceremony there was not a dry eye in the house. Respect for your enemy is paramount. The respect for humanity. I was pleased that we could follow in the footsteps of Returned Jonathan Meigs and his attitudes toward the enemy. You beat him, that's enough. Okay, we have an awards presentation to be done by our Vice President, Ross Kenny, otherwise known as Lieutenant Abel Batchelor. Lieutenant?
I just want to thank everybody for coming today, and I especially want to thank everybody who contributed money to make that plaque possible. When people heard what we were doing, especially in the town of Guilford, they were more than willing to give. And I also like to thank the gentleman to my right, Jim Murphy and the 9th of Foot. They are British soldiers. You may wonder why the British are here. They represent the 6 soldiers that were killed during the raid of Sag Harbor. We have Pauling's Levies, and we also have Hearts of Oak, and we also have Jim Miller from the 5th Connecticut. So please give them a round of hand. I have an award to a person that was paramount in getting this to happen. they were, once we spoke with them, they were more than enthusiastic to give us a hand and was a driving force behind it. Tracy, could you please come up? Late in the war, General Washington ordered a badge of merit to be made. It's a piece of cloth in the shape of a purple, made out of purple cloth in the shape of a heart, and it said merit in it. And it was to be given to a soldier who went above and beyond the call of duty. Tracy, in doing this project with us, went way above the call of duty. Way above the call of duty. We were ecstatically pleased on how enthusiastic she was. So Tracy, I want to present to you a certificate of merit for excellence in researching, planning, and commitment to the Meigs Plaque that was dedicated on this, this was printed back for the first one, the 19th day of May, 2018. And also, right here. And also, I spoke with the regiment, and they all agreed. And we're also giving Tracy an honorary membership into the 6th Connecticut Regiment. Here. Private Todd, front and center. It is my honor to present you with a proclamation from the town of Guilford. Thank you.
All right, so we're following the only script we have here. We didn't get a chance to practice any of this. However, the plaque unveiling is there. I mean, that's why we're here today, right? This plaque unveiling. Do y'all know where the plaque is? No. Yeah, I didn't think. Well, somebody knows. That's good. So we're gonna have to all turn around, or get up out of your chair and walk into the road. And I'm going to have Craig Reynolds, Tracy Tomaselli, and Ross Kenny do the official unveiling of the plaque. A little sometimes. Don't shoot me, Anthony. Ladies and gentlemen, we give you the Meigs plaque. Whoa. You guys interested in firing with us? Come on, lads. Sorry I didn't grab you first time.
Everybody goes home with dirty muskets today.
Detail, attention. Shoulder. Firelocks. About. Young children. Okay. Detail. Steps forward. March.
Right and loose.
Time and load on the end, yeah.
Make ready. Aim. Fire. Right and loose. Make ready. Aim. Fire. Right and loose. Good one. Make ready. Aim. Fire. Secure.
Firelock. Shoulder. Firelock.
What are they doing?
Hold it. Firelock.
Drop firelock. Good.
Okay.
Shoulder. Firelock.
Face. Yeah. To the front.
Arms as they go back.
Mark.
Detail. Present. Arms. Forward. March.
Do those layups.
Right. Wheel.
Face. Order firelocks. Rest.
Hold.
Ease.
And about. Face.
Okay.
5 steps forward. March.
The program calls for
Hold.
Hearts of
Right.
Oak
Face.
Independent Militia Company
Order.
to
On.
do an ending hymn. You have something for us, Mike?
Stand at ease. Well done.
About a little Yankee Doodle or some karaoke. Which one? Anything you all can play. Got it, Jared. Got something? Yeah, sure. refreshments served after the ceremony. And members of all the groups will be here for questioning. We did it. We admit it. No, we did it. In the meantime, anybody else have anything to add here?
Colonel, a moment, sir. Colonel. Good day, folks. I'd like to ask for a round of applause for our junior color guard auxiliary. They learned that a big part of a soldier's life is standing still. I'd also like to, on behalf of the Derby Historical Society and the David Humphreys House, General David Humphreys House, we would like to extend our congratulations to the town of Guilford on this auspicious event and to the 6th Connecticut. And last, I'd like to recognize the president of the Connecticut Sons of the American Revolution who have joined us, Mr. Damien Krigo. Thank you.
Today was a long day coming. We're pleased that you were here. We're pleased that we're here. And I think that about wraps it up. I could talk for an hour, but why bother? Refreshments? Thank you again, folks. Much appreciated. Have a great day.
Okay.